Hello, welcome to multi-window applications on the WPF path. The demonstration code we're going to look at to create a WPF application with multiple windows is Children Controls WPF. Before we look at that code, let's run the application. And as you can see, our main window is simply populated with a big button that says Create New Window. So we'll go ahead and click on that. And that creates another window. And in that window, we see two large buttons, Create New Button and List Children. So we'll click on Create New Button. And as you can see, a button appears here. And if we click on it, we get a message that says, "Hi, I'm child button number 1. There are currently 1 buttons." Okay. And as you might expect, we can click on that button multiple times. And each time that we do, we get a new child button. And that child button, let's say 10 for example, knows that it is the 10th button and there are currently 14 buttons. And if you click on List Children, you see a message box with information about all the buttons in that current window. Let's take a look at the code behind this application. And we'll start with the designer view of the main window. And as you can see in the XAML, the only added control in this XAML file is a button. Let's take a look at its event procedure. And that event procedure has the instantiation of an object, window with lots of buttons. And that class, window with lots of buttons, was added to this project in much the same way that WinForms adds forms to its classes. In other words, you go to the project, you right-click, you select Add, New Item, or Class, or in fact Window, and you will get that code. So once we've instantiated the object, we will use the show method to bring that window up. From here, let's take a look at the code that represents that new window. And here you see it, and it has a couple of large buttons, just as we saw before. And let's take a look at the XAML, which contains a grid, a wrap panel, and those 2 buttons. So what I want you to notice is this wrap panel. And we can see that wrap panel in this part of the designer. My point is that there's nothing in it. So let's take a look at the code behind for this page. And this is where the magic happens. So in this event procedure button, Create New Button, click, we see the instantiation of a new button. And as you can see there, I've initialized the content, which is analogous to the caption or the text of the button, to be the string format of child button and then the value of the field cardinal button. Okay, so that creates the button. I then assign an event procedure to it. In this case, I've chosen to use lambda syntax and an anonymous function, which as you can see does a messagebox.show. And then finally, to the wrap panel, which you may recall back in the designer was empty at design time, I access the children object and add to it the button that I've just created. So this is a way that you can dynamically create controls and apply them to your windows. Whether that window is a main window or any other window class in your application makes no difference. So that's creating a control dynamically and attaching it to a window, or in this case, the wrap panel in a window. And let's take a look at List Children. And this is another use of the children object inside of a wrap panel. So of course the children object contains the collection of all of the controls inside of it, whether they be dynamically created or created at design time. And then we can manipulate those controls, as you see here, in this case just getting the content, which I happen to know is in the form of a string. So now that we've seen all that, let's run the application again. Create a new window. You see that here. And I can create new buttons on that window and list those children. And if I go back to the main window and click Create New Window button, again, I get a new window with a new set of children. So these children are different than these children. And the reason it works that way, let me close this, is I created that second window, or third window as the case may be, as a local variable inside of a method as opposed to a field. Also, in displaying the window, I use show as opposed to show dialog. Run the application again, create new button, create a couple of new buttons, create new window, create a couple of new buttons, And then if I go back to main window, it won't let me because this is a dialog as opposed to a window. Now when I dismiss this, I can then go back to create new window. But because I've shown this as a dialog, I can only have one of these additional windows. Now if I did want to use the show method so that I could go freely back and forth between the two windows, but I only wanted one copy of that window, I could make this additional window object a field. And then the window's only created once, and I'm showing it here. So let's run that. Create new window. Now I can go back to the main window, but if I do and click create window, nothing happens. Because that command procedure is no longer creating a new window, it's simply showing one that's already been created. Now let me point out a couple of things. If we run the application again and create new window, we get the new window, and because this window is displayed using show instead of show dialog, I can go back to the main window. If I click on create new window, it doesn't create a new window, it just shows the original window, but notice that it does not bring it into focus. So if we want to change that, we'll have to go back to the code and include that. Now when we run the code, create new window, go back to the original window, and then create new window again, and it does bring the window into focus. One other thing to be concerned about though is it is possible to close this window. And now when I click create new window, because it doesn't actually create a new window, the application crashes. Of course, we want to address this problem. Unfortunately, there is no readily available property associated with the window class that will answer the question of whether or not it's legal at any given time to show a window. So we need to add a little bit of code to accomplish that, and there are a couple of ways that that could be done. Let's try overriding the onClosed method of the custom window class. We'll start by adding a CanBeShown property and making that modifiable only from the inside of the class, and then overriding the onClosed method, which will be called when the close event fires for the window. And go back to the main window code and make use of that property. And now we run the code. If we create a new window, it creates it just fine. Because I brought this window up with show rather than with show dialog, I can go back, I can click on create new window, which of course in this case does not create a new window, just brings up the old window and focuses it. And if for whatever reason I close this window and then go back to the main window and click create new window, it doesn't crash. Now obviously we want to modify the application a little bit so that the phrase create new window either makes more sense or we change that phrase. But either way, the program works as expected. So we've looked at creating a WPF application with multiple windows, with adding controls to controls using the children object, creating multiple copies of the same window class, or restricting it to only one copy, and properly handling the possibility that an attempt to call the show method on a given window object would fail. That was multi-window applications on the WPF path. Thanks for watching.